Welcome back to my animal education series. Today we're talking about something that's rather fascinating to me. It's about protective camouflage for animals that turn white in the wintertime and then return back to a normal coloration during the spring and the summer months. So, without any further ado, can you introduce yourself and tell us what organization you are with?
Absolutely. I'm Dr. Scott Mills and I'm at the University of Montana. We're on the beautiful University of Montana campus today. And just want to say to you, Cole, thanks for having me on. Appreciate you taking interest in this topic.
Many animals use their natural coloration, their shape, and their environment to hide from potential predators and prey. But today we're talking about animals that actually change their coloration in the winter and then in the summertime from white to a more natural coloration. So how many animals are out there that do this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's 21 species and they are found throughout the northern hemisphere. Almost the entire northern hemisphere is covered by them. And these include 6 different species of hares, species like snowshoe hares, white-tailed jackrabbits, Japanese hares, mountain hares across all of Europe or much of Europe and Asia. Also 3 species of mustelids, 3 species of weasels, also 3 species of ptarmigan, which is a grouse-like species, 8 species of very cute, adorable rodents, like the Siberian hamster, for example. And the Arctic fox changes from brown to white. And I believe that's all of them.
Are all of these animals found in North America, or can they be found other places in the world?
Yeah, so they are found throughout the northern hemisphere. Almost all of the northern hemisphere is covered by one, oftentimes multiple species of these species.
During your team's research, what did you find triggers the animals change in coloration? Is it the temperature, is it the season, or is it the presence of snow on the ground?
So I'd been studying snowshoe hares here in Montana for a whole bunch of years with a whole bunch of students, and increasingly we'd be out in the field, we'd have these radio-collared snowshoe hares, and over time we started seeing more and more instances of these white light bulbs, these white hares hopping around on a brown snowless background. And we were studying other things that had nothing to do with climate change, but I just started thinking more and more and more, what's happened with these white hares on brown backgrounds? Surely they're going to be more susceptible to being killed. And so I started reading and thinking more about it and finding out that the coat color change from being brown in the summer to white in the winter is driven by day length. The timing of it's driven by day length. This is the same metronome that causes birds to migrate at certain times of years, to migrate south and north. That's based on day length. The drop of leaves from trees is based on day length. And actually, maybe to extend this question a little bit more, I'm going to ask Grace, my student here, who I appreciate helping me with this, to shine the camera over here on the grass. So what do you see? Which of these jumps out faster? These are 2 pelts of weasels, actually that I got for trappers. Sorry, they don't look all that realistic. They're just the pelts of weasels. And there are actually a couple different species of weasels here. But I want you to just think, well, which of these 2 do you see the fastest? Obviously, you see this white light bulb, which is now mismatched on this snowless background. Now look over here. Here's a case where the 2 other weasels, and they're on a snowy background. The brown doesn't stick out quite as much as the white does over here, but these are the kinds of things that really got me thinking about this whole issue. Was we were getting less and less snow. I mean, here we are in Montana, early March. We have a lot of our snow is going fast. It's about 60 degrees, almost 60 degrees today. So we're seeing this reduction in number of days of snow on the ground. And so the question for me is, what happens to animals, to these kinds of animals?
This might be a strange question, so please bear with me, but does the prey's coloration change first, or does the predator's coloration change first, or do they change at roughly the same time?
First thing I'll say is that if you think back to that list of species, every single one of them is a prey species. Even Arctic fox get eaten quite a bit by golden eagles, for example. And I should mention we've worked on Arctic fox in Sweden and hares in Scotland and weasels here in the US, as well as snowshoe hares. So we've been thinking about a lot about these multiple species, how this plays out for multiple species. But all of these species are are prey, even weasels. They're of course a voracious predator on voles and other small mammals, but they themselves get eaten quite a lot. So you can imagine that what these animals that turn from brown to white, that natural selection has strongly shaped them to be well camouflaged with their environment. Camouflage is one of the widest solutions for prey species to stay alive in the animal kingdom.
Is there any evolutionary evidence that shows whether a prey or a predatory animal had these unique traits first?
So again, a big question, a big complicated question, and the short answer is that we don't know exactly the timing of this for all these species. We've done a lot of work into this question of the timing and the mechanism for the development of the brown and white coats for snowshoe hares. We've expanded that recently towards weasel species and towards mountain hares in Europe and Asia. But I guess what I'll use this question to talk a little bit more about is how is it that this trait exists across these vastly different species, from Arctic fox to weasels to hamsters to hares. Mother Nature has come up with the solution of seasonal camouflage as a really good solution to keep prey animals alive in a world filled with hungry predators. Like convergent evolution. In other words, if the whole act of survival requires a good solution to stay alive, for example, being brown or white appropriately, then the mutation in natural selection can lead to multiple independent ways of getting to that outcome. And that's what we see for hare species. We see that there's different mutational or genetic basis solutions to get to the same place.
In reading some of the studies on your webpage, I saw that there are weasels in the study group that remained brown through the winter months. Is this due to a lack of snowfall, or I'm definitely curious if it's an abundance of food? Because maybe if there is an abundance of food, there's less of a need for the animal to change coloration, versus if the food is more scarce, it's more beneficial to the animal to change coloration.
Turns out for all 21 of those species that I mentioned, for every single one of them, there are parts of their range where all individuals turn winter white. There are parts of their range where all individuals stay winter brown. They skip the winter white molt. And it's super exciting for thinking about sort of evolutionary rescue and sort of adaptation to climate change. There's also populations where within a single population there are winter white and winter brown individuals found together. And for weasels, that is the area, for example, around northern New York, the state of New York and northern New York State, and also for, say, hares in the Cascades of Washington and Oregon. There are these areas where the winter brown and winter white morphs live together. Now, so then why is that? Well, it turns out that we've looked really carefully at this for all coat color changing species, and you can predict the areas where all individuals are winter white as being the areas where the snow lasts the longest and is most predictable.
Do low snow years and high snow years affect the timeline for these animals' color change? Like if there is a early snow and then it doesn't snow the rest of the season, will the animals start turning back to their natural coloration sooner than if it is more consistently snowy?
But the trigger for that change is day length. So natural selection has led to the triggering being based on day length, which is over deep time. It's a reliable measure of when the snow on average is going to come. Now, there's always variability around that, right? Anybody that lives in snowy areas knows that some years the snow comes earlier and some years it comes later. But on average, there's always been some mismatch, some brown on white mismatch or white on brown mismatch. But on average, it favors one some years, the other years, and so it sort of washes out to make that trait function well on average as a superior means of camouflage. But what we're seeing now is this shortening of the number of days of snow on the ground, and yet the animals are continuing to change from brown to white. And so now what we're seeing is what we call directional selection, where there's a lot more selection now on that winter white form, because it's a lot more likely that the winter whites are going to be exposed to brown ground than it is the winter brown are going to be exposed to white ground.
And everything you told us, the change in the climate and the snowfall for those years could drastically impact prey populations, resulting in potentially more predatory deaths in seasons with less snowfall. Now, would that lead to an increase of prey animal populations without the color changing traits?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And an important one that we're pursuing is to ask, well, how might animals be able to deal with the cost of being mismatched? And so one thing you might imagine is maybe animals that are maybe mortality leads to some compensation where reproduction goes higher. We don't really see a big scope for that for a few reasons. We don't see that reproduction would be able to compensate, but one thing that we are very interested in is how these animals might be able to adapt in place. And so that's why I like to say this is a very visual story about climate change, because this is a trait that's shaped by climate. The brown and the white coats are shaped by natural selection to adapt local populations to straight up climate. So it's not crazy to ask what are the conditions or the scope or the possibility for natural selection to rescue these species by either changing the phenology, changing the timing of the molt over time, or for natural selection to just act on skipping the winter white molt entirely.
Unlike some of the other animals that do seasonal color change, weasels are very hard to find. So how did you find these weasels to conduct your research?
So what we do is we go out, we live catch animals, and then we put, for snowshoe hares I'll say first, then I'll get to the weasels. We live catch snowshoe hares and we put radio collars on them, radio transmitters on them, and then we're able to follow them around and see what kind of environment do they choose, the brown or the white, how do they move across snow or across brown ground. But as you say, it's a lot harder to do that kind of approach with weasels. You can put radio collars on them, but they don't transmit as far because weasels go underground and under the snow, and even keeping a radio collar on a weasel is harder. So what we did for weasels, and actually for some other species as well, is to use remote cameras. Everybody knows that now it's getting easier and easier to buy these trail cams, these cameras you can put out and get pictures of animals triggered by motion. And so we've done that with the weasels. We set up a bait station where we had a piece of chicken liver and some sort of stinky weasel bait, and so that would attract the weasels in, and then they would get their picture taken, and we could use that to ask how is their coat color changing.
Based on the information on your website, there are numerous animals that change colors seasonally. Now, could climate change affect this behavior going forward?
We've already talked about that quite a bit, but I guess something I'd add on to that is to say that this is such a great system to study this question of adaptation to climate change, because in this case you can really see it. I mean, you can see the brown and the white. You can see, you know this is shaped by the presence of snow, so you know it's a trait shaped by climate, and you know there's very strong selection on it. And so it's a great system to study this question of adaptation. So as I mentioned before, we're going at that hard, both to ask what is the scope for rapid evolutionary change, evolutionary rescue, and what is the scope for adaptation through plasticity, like I mentioned.
Thank you so much for helping me put this video together. I personally find this topic super interesting, how animals can change colors in the winter and the summertime. And you came along and gave me the amazing opportunity to learn about this, so I thank you very much for that. And thank you guys for watching this week's video. Don't forget to leave a big thumbs up down below, subscribe to my channel, and as always, my dog's running off. But as always, I'll see you next week.